Thank you so much, Damien, for coming here and just giving us whetting our appetite on not just your book, but also just reminding us of just what wonderful, fascinating history we have on our doorstep. That is Trent Park and the Mansion House. It's fantastic, and it's a delight to just be informed and encouraged to how much we have on our doorstep that we can give real life to, and just open up to many others, not just ourselves privileged to hear about that, but to people around the borough, to around London, around the country. This is a huge asset, a crown, it's a jewel in the crown of our borough, but also of our nation. And this is what we need to help grasp and ensure that we're able to display to the nation. Thank you so much. And if it's whet your appetite to find out about the book, I've explained to you how you can get hold of that book, but also you can hear more about Damien's book. There's details on your chair. There's details of an event that's happening on the 22nd of July in the evening, where not only we're able to hear more from Damien about his book, but also there's the opportunity, and with kind permission of Berkeley Homes, to have exclusive access to the Mansion House for a reception where we will be able to delight in the book and delight in its proper surroundings in the Mansion House. So really grateful to Berkeley Homes for that. You'll need to apply for tickets to come, so have a look at the details on your chair, and if you're interested, please apply to be one of those exclusive guests who can come along and delight in the history of Trent Park. I'd now like to open another chapter of the history of Trent Park. It's World War II history, and delighted again to welcome Dr. Helen, who's very much involved in the campaign, but also indebted to you, Helen, for your book, The M Room, which has just brought to light what I didn't know growing up here until I'd heard stories about the prisoner of war camp, but I didn't know until you have helped unearth its extraordinary history during the World War II time. So over to you, Dr. Helen Fry.
Thank you very much, and I echo what everyone said before me. Thank you for coming this evening to hear what is of huge importance, not just locally, but to the nation. And we do thank all of you who have helped us with the campaign. I think some of us are actually going to lose our day jobs, but never mind. I just want to give you a little bit of a flavour of the Second World War period before we move into a little bit of the museum concept, which is a working vision, and to try and enable you to perhaps understand just what could be achieved to save this for educational purposes and for the nation. So the Second World War period, its commanding officer, Kendrick, moved his tiny unit, his bugging unit, from wonderful, iconic Tower of London, where they had just 6 members of staff, to Trent Park in January 1940. And of course, the prisoners who were in Tower of London must have thought when they arrived they were going to get their heads chopped off. It must have been absolutely terrifying. But the prisoners from January 1940 were brought to Trent Park, and British intelligence understood that whoever won the intelligence game would win the war. Duke of Marlborough, Churchill's ancestor, and therefore Bletchley Park, cracking the enigma, the signals intelligence, alongside the human intelligence. How do you get the information out of the prisoners' the brains, basically? They're going to have an awful lot of information that they are not going to give you in interrogation, particularly during the early part of the war. And so a very clever deception, which ran for the whole duration of the war, and eventually across 3 sites, of which Trent Park was one. You give them a phony interrogation, usually at another site, and you see in the transcripts 100,000 of them that survive in the National Archives. Many of the German prisoners thought we were stupid. We didn't know how to conduct an interrogation. But it's all part of this amazing deception. And from May 1942, that's when things start to liven up at Trent Park, because Trent Park was reserved for the German generals. And this is probably part of the story that you've all heard. And when I was writing the book, The M Room, and of course I worked through the transcripts of the conversations, But it was also the intelligence reports that brought this alive for me. This is a very human story, and in one chapter I called Mad Hatter's Tea Party, because quite literally the life that starts to emerge in Trent Park, you couldn't make it up. And what do I mean by that? I'll just give you a couple of gems before we move on to the museum concept. Rather than bringing the German generals to a regular prisoner of war camp with your Nissen huts and your barbed wire, and yes, of course, Trent Park had its barbed wire, but they were escorted, essentially, from the battlefields with their batmen, their ceremonial valets, if you like, in their uniforms, with their medals. They were escorted down that wonderful drive, and instead of coming to a regular prisoner of war camp, they see the house. And at the door of the house, they're greeted, and any of you who saw the Channel 4 documentary will know, Lord Aberfeldy. Lord Aberfeldy, the German generals were told, he is your welfare officer, second cousin of the king, with distinguished Scottish ancestry. He is going to be your welfare officer. Of course, he was nothing of the sort. He worked for what we now know as MI6. And of course, the German generals never twigged. And it was Lord Aberfeldy who had the dreadful job of telling the generals one day that they'd have to share bedrooms. And of course, that caused a lot of problems. But as soon as the generals were escorted, and by the end of the war we had 59 of them in Trent Park. Can you imagine 59 top generals in one house that's run like a gentleman's club? It's very English, just wonderful. And everything is bugged. Not just the light fittings and the fireplaces, but the plant pots, the billiards table, the trees in the gardens. Everything is bugged, and we're picking up the most incredible intelligence. And it was designed to make them relax. Don't forget, they'd had their interrogation. They're now in this luxurious home that had been given by the king. In fact, one of them thought it was actually Windsor Castle. But to soften them up, how can I think it's Windsor Castle? Anyway, to soften them up, Kendrick and his team would take them, some of you who've been to my talks will know this story, would take them for trips into central London. And of course, they get out, because when they travelled, they had the blinds down. They get out and they'd look around, and talking in German, of course, and they'd say, well, I thought we'd flattened London. And of course, it's a very good, because they weren't taken to the bits that were bombed. And they were taken to Simpson's on the Strand. No one's still offered to take me to Simpsons on the Strand. I've never had a meal there. One day, I think somebody might offer to take me to Simpsons on the Strand. But I can't walk past it without thinking of this story. And so they have this meal, and everything's designed to make them relax. And they are now completely unguarded. Their egos have gone through the roof because, British intelligence has understood, and we hope they still, understand the psyche of your enemy. And that all went very well until a certain person walked in one day, Churchill. Now, of course, Churchill was very supportive and gave an unlimited budget for 2 other sites to be created, but he was not impressed. And Kendrick and some of the intelligence chiefs were called before Churchill privately, and Churchill forbade, and his wording, the pampering of the generals. He said, it's all very well what you're doing at Trent Park, but you've gone too far. So he took them to the Ritz instead. It's like, what's going on here? One more story, and I will move on, because I am conscious that I do have limited time for the other speakers too. Hitler's birthday. The intelligence, they all come down in their Sunday best. And the secret listeners, like Fritz's colleagues who were in the basement of the house, were listening to all the plottings in the little rooms. And they had a crisis, because at Trent Park now, there were so many generals there, and some of them were anti-Nazis and some of them were pro-Nazis. Thinking, hang on a minute, how can you... And they had the most incredible political rows and discussions. What are we going to do if the anti-Nazis refuse to raise their glass at supper to Hitler? It's like, what is this? We will expel them from the officers' corps when we get back to Germany and we're in power. And so one of the intelligence chiefs has written in the margins, these guys are never getting back in power. And, you know, for me, it brings history alive. And the book and the transcripts, of course, there's a lot more that could have gone into the book. The story is full of the human side of this secret war. But it had, before I move on to the museum concept, a deeply serious side, and that was the intelligence that they gathered at Trent Park, I believe, is parallel and worked alongside very closely with Bletchley. The sites at the highest level had regular meetings. We know that from the intelligence reports. To give you one example of what was confirmed, if you like, we knew a little bit about the secret weapon beforehand, but it was at Trent Park, 2 German generals after the fall of Stalingrad that said, you know, don't worry, we aren't going to lose the war because we have the secret weapon. And it was a direct result of that we knew about, we had got confirmation of Peenemünde, the development of the V1, and the generals then began talking about the V2, the V3, of which there is one in a military site, which could hopefully be loaned to us, I don't know, and the atomic bomb program. So it is next. Very, very important site. That's just one example of the tons of intelligence that could be gathered. So I hope I've convinced you all that we need a museum. It is, as I say, of national and international significance. Sorry, can I just have some water? Because there was an American contingent. So we've had support from General Michael Hayden, former head of the CIA. So I have to be careful we don't upset him. We don't get the museum, which I know we will, Barclay promised. We don't really want the CIA coming down heavy on us. Anyway, so yes, we all understand the significance of its pre-war history and of its World War history, which is growing. I mean, I've got talks every single week between now and the middle of August. I can't actually go on holiday. No. And then in September, they go crazy. And sometimes I've got 4 talks a week, all about, of the several books that I've written, the interest is here in Trent Park and its 2 sister sites. And only yesterday, we've had a request, which Barclay are facilitating, for filming for Yesterday Channel and Discovery in America. They're doing a joint project on secrets of the Nazis, and they want to film for Trent Park. So that's all very well, but what about the museum? We do have some ideas. And it's work in progress, and as I say, next please. We are quite ambitious, and this might be, I think, for us the museum is the most contentious point, and one of which we're still in discussions with Barclay. We've recognised the need for the space to be able to tell the story properly. I mean, we envisage a kind of scaled-down Bletchley Park, and that you can actually walk through and experience. You don't necessarily have to have original valuable objects to experience what they've transformed at Bletchley and the stuff at Bentley Priory. That is awesome. The multimedia, that's the thing. The multimedia, that is chilling at points. It's really chilling. And we hope to recreate that. But to be able to, we believed, to do justice to this, we believe we need, as you can see behind me, half of the stable block as part of the learning centre, cafe. I've pinched a photograph from Bentley Priory, but it's one of the most beautiful cafes I've been in, actually, for offices, and also as the introductory interactive next panels. So, working analysis then, stable block featuring an introduction, if you like, to the secret war, placing Trent Park so that people understand its significance within the Second World War, with interactive stuff again. The spying game, we've called, its uniqueness of the operation with the German generals, etc., and something, and possibly even to recreate an interrogation room, which I think, again, I don't think has been done anywhere else. So the first level of deception, the phony interrogation next. Now, you may not be aware, and I don't expect you to be aware, but Trent Park and its 2 sister sites in Buckinghamshire, Latimer House and Wilton Park, are already part of the school's national curriculum World War II, Key Stage 3 and 4, not quite sure what that means, but anyway, Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, English and history modules. But they don't have anywhere to visit, and nothing interactive. And they do their visits to Bletchley Park, we know, for a different part of the curriculum, but we want to bring this together. And this is just taken, they've recreated Kendrick's desk. It's only accessible for schools for safety reasons, and you just click on different bits and it opens up the different worlds and then the secret listeners. So this would be part, London Grid for Learning, which is the educational charity that supply 97% of schools, actually have got this module. It's live, it's all done, all developed, and they are happy and hopeful that we can facilitate something at Trent Park next. The Mansion House, we wouldn't, as you know, we're not suggesting the whole of the Mansion House. We are hopeful for the whole of the ground floor and the basement. And the Mansion House, of course, would feature, this is a work in progress, as I will state again, perhaps one might call the Churchill room, would celebrate the pre-war years, which are so rich, and I think which have now really come to life thanks to Damien's book. I think without your book, we really would have lost so much, and hope that you'll help with that. There's lots of stuff next. And also, of course, Kendrick's, to recreate Kendrick's desk, pretty much like they've recreated stuff at Bletchley Park, and that is actually a photograph of Kendrick at Trent Park. And in the basement, the M room, where the secret listeners worked, a room to also celebrate and commemorate what the women did, and also Trent Park alongside Bletchley being the two sites where the first confirmation on British soil of the concentration camps and what was going on. Some of the stuff they heard at Trent Park was horrific. And, we envisage putting something in the basement within there, something on the air intelligence. This site is so huge, its history is so huge, that each of the rooms, I haven't gone through each of the rooms here because I run out of time, but we have enough material to do that. And then it's hoped that one would walk back up the other side into the stately rooms, where you experience the stately rooms and something of the life. Who were the generals? Where did they come from? How were they captured? Something about, like they've done at Bletchley, the listening to conversations and interactive stuff through those rooms next. Berkeley have offered us, it's a little bit ambiguous, but the dark areas, so we don't have one of those magic pointers, at least on this hand side is secure. The other two rooms, possibly for the museum, but / community use next. And the basement, again, just this small area here. And it's our belief that this is not enough space. It's basically, a few broom crubbers maybe. It's not going to do justice to the story, and people are not going to pay to visit just these small spaces. We want to make this a proper national museum that people will come and visit next. We will celebrate, as I said, the personalities, the men and women who ran this clandestine operation that haven't had much public recognition because the story was so secret. Something, example, about the big stories which are emerging about the atomic bomb program. There's quite a few books coming out, the secret weapons, something to understand the impact of what the bugging operation achieved, and linking that in with Bletchley and the other intelligence sites, and something, of course, representing the Americans. And we have a meeting with the American Embassy and possible funding coming from American sector next. We're nearly there. Oh, we've got that again. Okay, sorry, next. So, we've got material in the way, what would we put? Creating through actors and visual stuff, creating the life of Trent Park. I have over 1,500 photographs that are relevant to its wartime period. There are original files. We can provide an immersive experience as we get with the more modern, up-to-date museums today next. So I'm coming to my final 2 slides now. Kendrick's deputy, who actually worked out of Wilton Park, said had it not been for the information obtained, well, he said at these centres, but particularly Trent Park, it could have been London and not Hiroshima that was devastated by the atomic bomb. That is how serious a contribution Trent Park made to the war, and we need to keep spreading the word. It's growing. Its secrecy has been hidden for a lot longer. What it did has been kept secret for a lot longer. The Bletchley stuff came out a lot earlier, and we know, could we ever envisage a world without Bletchley Park? I don't think we could. It would be a travesty. And we are now where Bletchley Park was in around 2009, and we have to save something substantial on this site. And we really hope Berkeley will be amenable, because we do believe that you've got a huge development, and we don't have a problem with that. But we really would like something proper. Last slide. So that is some taster of the vision, and we look forward to the day when this project can be realised. Thank you.